Hey everyone. Okay, so I'm super excited to talk about this. I've actually been reading a ton about this in the last, I would say, several months. And I'm just super stoked to talk about why dyslexia is a spectrum disorder. And the reason that it excites me, and it should excite you too, if you have a kid who's struggling with dyslexia. And I'm even going to say a lot of this pertains to learning difficulties in general. But the reason that this should excite you is because once you understand that dyslexia is a spectrum disorder, and I don't mean autism spectrum, then you understand how to better help your child and the ways in which you can do that. So basically, what we have to understand is that dyslexia is more than just a learning difference. Yes, it is a learning disability, learning difference, whatever you want to say, but it's also a neurodevelopmental disorder, right? It falls under that category, medically speaking. And neurodevelopmental disorders are spectrum disorders. And I'm going to get into why that is and so forth. So if this is all new and you're like, what? I've never heard of this in my life. This doesn't make any sense. Then stick with me. And I'm going to be talking about my first two reasons today. And then on Thursday, I'm going to continue getting into other reasons and so forth. So first of all, neurodevelopmental disorders have to do with an incomplete development of the nervous system. And this has been studied widely and has been, determined with both dyslexia, learning difficulties, and so forth, that the nervous system is not, fully developed, if you will. And that can range. So in terms of a spectrum, as you know, your child's difficulties can range from mild to severe. And some of that will have to do as well with how incompletely developed their nervous system is. So other factors, of course, that I talk about and I will be talking about in relation to it being a spectrum disorder, is mentioned as well in terms of, genetic factors, food, nutrition, biochemistry, toxicity, all of that in terms of how severe the dyslexia is going to be. And if you have a child, more than one child, and I know this is quite common, where a family will have more than one child who struggles, then you want to keep this in mind in terms of the severity and why the severity is there. Okay, so enough about that. So it's basically, if you think of autism spectrum, that has to do with a right brain delay and a left brain overdevelopment. And the other thing with autism is that it's been known, to be honest, it's very much known today, but as far back as the 1940s, there were physicians saying that this is a whole body disorder. Autistic kids have issues with their gut, they have issues with nutritional deficiencies, other ailments and illnesses and so forth. So it's not, basically that's really ties into dyslexia and so forth. And so whenever you start understanding this, it's really amazing because then you can understand how to further help your child and understand you're not limited in the way that you might think you are in terms of how to help your child. So this is ultimately how you are going to be able to help your child shift in a way that goes beyond just reading instruction, science-based reading instruction, and so forth. And again, those are all, obviously science-based reading instruction can't be dismissed. That's obviously really important. So number one, dyslexia is a spectrum disorder because it ranges from mild to severe. So and I want to say first, I honestly really struggle with mild because obviously, yes, these kids are more likely to get by. And that's with any kind of disorder. But I also find these are the kids that are more likely to slip through the cracks because they can kind of get by in their early years. And then after a while, it becomes more apparent, often not until middle school and possibly even high school, but more, grade 6, 7, 8, that these kids, it becomes more obvious, whoa, this isn't just someone who's weak or needs more practice or something really serious going on here. And so these are the kids who might slip through. And I talked about this last week. These are even the adults who might hate reading, avoid taking academic or professional risks because they're not strong at reading and they think it's just they suck at reading, and it's totally not that. There's no such thing as that. They actually have a, there's all kinds of reasons why that's taking place. So mild to severe is, really important to understand. Mild doesn't mean it's not a big deal. But by the same token, when a child has severe dyslexia, what the research shows and what I've seen in clinic, again and again and again, is there's multiple factors. Typically, when it's when it's severe, there are multiple reasons why this child has dyslexia, and often these reasons are more severe. So, for example, a child might have severe dyslexia and have really poor gut health and have really poor brain organization, and they might have a really high toxic load, where a child who has mild dyslexia might only have one of those or might have all of those, but all of those are mild factors. The other thing that's really interesting with the spectrum is it's not just, does someone have mild or moderate or severe dyslexia? It's also, but it will vary from day to day, right? That's the other interesting thing about spectrum disorders is your child might tell you, yeah, I did really good on the test. I had a good day. And what these people mean and these kids mean is some days, I remember a family of mine telling me when they were at this private school, it was so weird how some days they could read no problem and answer the questions, and then other days it was really poor. And there's biochemical reasons for that. And that's why that aspect or factor is so important to address. So it varies from day to day. And then also it can vary as they get older. So what we want, I'm going to say, we definitely want, in terms of worst case scenario, is we want them to go from, say they have severe dyslexia to mild dyslexia as they get older. And I say worst case scenario because I know that it's possible for someone to go from severe dyslexia to, fluently being able to read and so forth. But sometimes what we will see, because of areas of breakdown that just become exasperated, is kids might start off mildly and then things might continue to break down because there's biochemical factors. There's even stuff like, I worked with a few kids who've had Lyme disease and their parents had no idea, other co-infection or stealth infections, I should say, that was impacting their ability to learn, read, sometimes, behave, but that's a whole other story, and so forth. And so, that is important to understand that role and so forth. But if those are factors that become worse over time, then their problems could become more severe instead of less severe. Okay, the other factor is, or reason number 2 that I want to talk about today, is that with dyslexia, like many other difficulties, there are multiple areas of breakdown. So as I've said over and over again, when it comes to multiple diagnosis, meaning your child has dyslexia and ADHD, or dyslexia and dyspraxia, or dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyspraxia, or any other combination of those kind of acronym diagnosis, this is the norm, not the exception. And, this is all indication. It's not that, your child is a lemon, or, these are the things I hear all the time. They had bad luck, just bad genes. No, absolutely not. But the fact that these kids typically have multiple diagnoses is an further indication that the nervous system is immaturely developed. And so it's affecting multiple areas, and that there is biochemical imbalances, and that as well is affecting multiple areas. And so, all of the things like difficulty tying shoes, having a hard time learning to ride a bike, pronouncing words, detecting different sounds, all of that type of stuff that we see with dyslexic kids that is not necessarily pertinent to them actually decoding or reading comprehension, are all indications of an underdeveloped nervous system. Another example is mixed dominance. I can't tell you how many kids I work with. They'll use their, right hand to write, but they prefer to kick with their left hand when they're playing soccer or something. Or parents aren't aware that they have mixed dominance, but then I screen them and it's very clear they have mixed dominance. So, and the other thing I want to say is that the very fact that we can diagnose dyslexia with 95% accuracy by the age of 5 years old before a child begins to read. That's what all of the leading research has shown for a long time and still continues to show. the fact that we can do that shows that dyslexia is so much more than a reading difficulty. It, again, I go back to, it's a whole body issue. And so basically whole body, whole brain issue. The other and last thing I want to talk about today is the gut microbiome. I'm huge on this. I know that a lot of research has come out, I want to say last many years, on the link between autism spectrum disorder and gut bacteria, and even like depression and those types of mood disorders, anxiety, and so forth. But I see a lot of parents who have kids with ADHD or ASD who are tackling gut health when their kids have these focus, behavior, mood, anxiety issues and so forth. Few moms seem to be aware of the very, very, very major impact that gut health has on the brain, memory, reading, processing, decoding, cognition, all of that stuff, even though there's tons of studies that have shown this. And even specifically with dyslexia, research has found that the gut microbiome affects brain structure and cognition. And so let me also give you some really interesting stats or research that's been found that really drives home the idea that kids with dyslexia often have a compromised gut health, if you will. So compromised gut bacteria or microbiome, I should say, and a compromised even gut lining. So I'm going to get into that as simply as I can without boring you to tears. So number one, it was found that kids with eczema have a 72% higher risk of developing a learning disability like dyslexia. And when I read that, I was like, oh my goodness, that is like, to me, that's insane, but cool that we're not talking about it, but cool because that gets me excited and thinks this is like why I know this is why I get, see the results with my clients and we start working on gut healing, because eczema is very much tied to gut health. And so it's no surprise to me, even though it is to a lot of other parents, that their child's that eczema is very high among kids with dyslexia and other learning disabilities. It's all a symptom of imbalance in the body, a whole body disorder, a gut that needs repair, among so many other things. And let me know in the comments below, does your child have gut health issues? Do they, whether it's obvious or not, maybe it's constipation, diarrhea, maybe it's psoriasis, eczema, maybe they were, had, digestive issues when they were a baby, colic, tummy aches, all of that type of stuff are all red flags that their gut health is not optimal. So the other thing that was found is that kids with dyslexia and learning disabilities are more prone to autoimmune conditions. They are more likely, as I've said, to have gut issues like constipation, diarrhea, and even more prone to have autoimmune issues like asthma and allergies. And I mentioned eczema. All of this is related to the gut and gut health. And what's really interesting is that one study found, number one, that when kids went on gut healing diets, there was improved cognitive function. And again, those changes to the brain structure. So super exciting. Yes, you can change your kid's brain, not just through brain training exercises like I do in my 6-month program, but also you can do it through, through biochemistry. And this goes down to the gut manufacturers, the gut bacteria manufacturers neurotransmitters, aka brain chemicals, that play a key role in learning, concentration, and so forth. And if there is an inflamed gut, then there's going to be leaky gut. And gut inflammation is going to occur because of all kinds of stuff that we're doing, eating irritants. So whether it's food allergens or just, processed food with all kinds of chemicals, all that type of stuff, we're going to end up with leaky gut. That's like basically little tiny holes in our intestinal lining. And then those holes allow certain things like, say, food particles to pass through. The immune system goes haywire. It's like, whoa, this is an allergen, sets off the alarm bells. And next time your kid eats that, they've built up antibodies to this and so forth. So basically, we want to, when our kids have multiple food allergies, which I'm going to be talking more about next or on Thursday in relation to dyslexia as a spectrum disorder, That's why we have to address all of these different areas. So ultimately what happens when there's leaky gut, not just poor gut bacteria, is that's going to compromise nutrient absorption of critical brain nutrients. Food is not getting broken down properly. It's not being assimilated and absorbed properly. And that means you can't out supplement, or even putting your kid on a healthy diet is amazing, but make sure that it's a gut healthy diet and a gut healing diet, because if it's not gut healthy and gut healing, then they're not necessarily going to even absorb all those good foods that you're trying to feed them. And again, that's why it's so important to work on gut healing, which, as I've mentioned, we do in my 6-month program, as well as one of the early steps to improving this overall. So let me know if any of this makes sense in terms of what you're seeing with your kiddo, whether it's dyslexia or learning disability in general. Do they have, is it mild, moderate, severe? Does it vary from day to day? Has it gotten worse over time? Is there multiple areas of breakdown? So is there either officially multiple diagnosis, or I have lots of moms say, I don't need to get a diagnosis. I already know my child has ADHD and dyslexia, or dyspraxia and dyslexia, or whatever. And then also, do they have poor gut health? So let me know in the comments below. I will also post the link to my free starter kit, the Laser Focused Learner, with some exercises and stuff for getting started. So you can grab that for free. And then if you are interested in learning more about my 6-month program, you can book a free clarity call, and I'll put a link for that in the bio as well. So thanks for watching, everyone. Have a fantastic day.